Hi guys, welcome back to another video. So if you haven't seen last week's video, I did end up doing the first page in the sketchbook. So today we are going to be tackling a different spread. Now I did take a very small break from working on anything, but I managed to sketch out a quick little spread of Voyager from Reverse 1999. So that is what we are going to be working on today. So my plan is to use alcohol markers for today's session. So I already went ahead and did my sketch already off camera just because I wasn't planning technically on doing this for today's video, but might as well do it for today. So I ended up doing the sketch in the color red with the Pilot Color Eno as usual, which is this pencil right here with the kneaded eraser at the very end so I can clean up any small mistakes here and there. But because we're working with alcohol markers, I already know that these particular pens actually work quite well because they don't really smudge or bleed, and I can have kind of like a plethora of colors that I can use for V-line work. So these are the Magicfly dual tipped markers, and it has a brush tip on one side and a fine liner on the other. So I decided to pick out a dark blue and kind of like a burgundy-ish red kind of color. So we're going to do majority of the line art with this particular marker first, and at the very end I'm going to kind of spruce things up a little bit and make kind of like darker, bolder line art with the dark blue on top just to make everything pop from my page. So to start off, I am just going to be working with the pen first, and then later on I will be lightening up my sketch afterwards because I don't want to have too many red straight lines kind of floating around before we do the coloring process. Even though if I start to really work in the marker, the kind of like red color of my pencil kind of blends into it. So there's only really a few areas where you can kind of see a lot of the red pencil showing through. But oftentimes I'm working with like warmer skin tones, so the red lines don't really affect it too much, which is usually my concern because I like keeping the face a little bit more clean and pristine. But if I'm working with something that has like, let's say a blue skin tone or something, I might opt for a different color, like a blue lead or just anything a little bit more neutral rather than something super warm, because I don't want to have accidental kind of like purple areas or mixing in too much red into like a different colored skin tone, if that makes sense. So I have been really enjoying Reverse 1999, and I guess it'll be a few days after by the time I have already posted this video, and I was already late by the time I was sketching this. So Voyager's birthday was actually a few days ago, and she's one of my favorite characters. Now the interesting thing is that she doesn't really speak that much at all, but I think she's like an adorable character, even though I don't think this is spoilers technically, if you can like read her blurb and stuff, I guess. But if I remember correctly, she's technically an alien that's taking form as this girl right now, and kind of like as she's residing on Earth, I guess is how it is. And she technically has, I think it's 55 languages that are like from Earth that she has mastered, but she doesn't talk a lot. She often like hums and sings, and she plays the violin, obviously, as you can see depicted here. And I don't know, I just really like her design overall. And I've mentioned this in like previous videos where I've mentioned Reverse 1999, where I say that if you really like some pretty art, especially if it's like splash art and stuff, definitely check out the artwork and just like the art direction in general for like Reverse 1999, I think is like just wonderful to look at. It has a little bit more of like that painterly style at some points. Sometimes it's like super detailed and a little bit more flat, but oftentimes it has this really nice kind of like gestural, a little bit more painterly-esque kind of style, which I really like looking at, and just like the way how some of the characters look and are animated, because they do a lot of rigging for the characters as well, which I love seeing. So I've been really enjoying the game a lot, to the point where I feel like I play it a little bit more than some of my other games. Even though like I have been playing it quite a bit, I haven't really progressed too much in the story quite like as much as I would have liked to, because I'm fully immersed and am very interested in the story to the point where I need to put my full attention on it because I want to learn more about like their world and like the idea of like the arcanists and all that stuff. So when I finally have time, I'm gonna catch up on a bunch of different games with their stories and stuff, because I have been just I just been doing my dailies, if that makes sense. And then after that, I just kind of like log out and then continue about my day. But one day I'm just gonna sit down and get through everything so that I can finally catch up and not have like such a large backlog. Because at this point, I need to catch up on Genshin. I don't know if I'll ever catch up on Tears of Famous anymore. I'm not sure if I'm as like dedicated to it as much. But then other than that, I have Honkai Star Rail obviously, and then I have Reverse 1999, and then I occasionally still play Ensemble Stars here and there, but not as much. But yeah, I think it's just because like I have other things I want to do that I've been playing my games a little bit less. And then the time that I do have to play games, I'm playing like Stardew with my friends or I'm catching up on Core Keeper. So it's just my priorities are like all over the place, but I always love the character designs or just the characters in general. So I feel like more attached to them. So Voyager is definitely one of my favorites, and I love like her color palette, the idea of like the kind of like celestial and like star constellation-esque design around her is just really pretty. So she's just really cute. I highly recommend just looking up the art because my art's not going to do her justice, but I still wanted to draw her anyways. So for the most part, we are kind of finishing up the line work. Now I wanted to get your guys' opinion on whenever I do like traditional art videos, do you guys like seeing more snippets or do you like seeing kind of like an overview with time lapse? I think I asked this before previously, but I think it was a little bit more tailored towards kind of like painting. So like gouache or whenever I work with watercolors, and usually it's kind of like a mixed response. I do like leaving in some of the real-time footage like I did for the inking, and you can see that right here I lightened my sketch quite a bit, but now I'm going in with my alcohol markers, which I forgot right away to place a sheet of, I guess like plastic or just another thicker piece of paper underneath this sketchbook paper because it's quite thin, so bleed through happened like immediately. So to keep everything else clean, it's good to separate your pages if you know you don't want bleed through to happen too badly on like subsequent pages. But for the first, I guess like Voyager drawing that I'm doing, so the one on the very right, the larger one, I ended up doing, I think, it in time lapse, and then the other one I decided to do more like snippets. So definitely let me know what you kind of prefer, or if you have like a preference per medium, then I will definitely consider kind of like catering towards that a little bit more, because I do think some of these sessions do get a little bit long. Luckily, I think this only took 2 hours, so it wasn't too bad. But like painting or like, I guess painting is probably the worst one for me. That one takes usually like 4 to 5 hours depending on the size of the piece. So usually I tend to prefer speed, like putting into more of like a time lapse if anything, because the speed of it just becomes very slow, and a lot of it is like me waiting for things to dry, me mixing colors and all that. But for doing real time, I definitely think it's like it works a little bit better where there's like not too large of jumps in between each portion. Sometimes I feel like it's a hard time for me to gauge whether or not I jump too much and people can't understand the process as much, if that makes sense. So right away for the larger Voyager, I accidentally did not section her hair in a way that made sense. So her hair has kind of like a two-toned color. It's majority kind of like a ultramarine-ish dark blue, and then a kind of very pale yellow. It's on the cooler side, and it's kind of like near the, I'm gonna call it kind of like the air vents, so like the little part that kind of goes into like an M shape at the top of her skull, and then on the inside of her hair it's that yellow color. But when I decided to distribute kind of the yellow color throughout her hair, I accidentally made too much of the back of her hair yellow and did not leave enough room for the blue to shine through. And because of that, I ended up mixing some of the blue and the yellow together, and it kind of just made it a little bit muddy and dark. So hopefully I do a little bit of a better job on the smaller one. But I do want to draw Voyager on a larger scale. I don't know if I want to do it with like watercolor or gouache kind of attempting it, or if I want to do like a full digital piece, because I do have an idea that I kind of want to do. It's kind of similar to my Mona piece, if you've seen that one like a long time ago, because I would love to do like a constellation lit tile floor with her playing the violin, and I don't know how to explain it. Maybe I'll do it for a video and we can kind of like plan out the composition and stuff together. Also, I do apologize if you play the violin. I'm pretty sure like the way how I have her arm in her hand, and just like the way where I think it's the chin rest for the violin might be incorrectly placed, because I don't really look at people playing the violin too much, and there was like certain angles I was looking at that kind of made sense, kind of didn't make sense, so it's kind of just like all over the place. Another thing I was struggling with, especially like when I'm recording some of these traditional videos, not at my usual setup, I like to use the natural lighting as much as I can, but the amount of sunlight that I get nowadays because of daylight saving is not as much as usual. So it gets darker like around 4 p.m., I think, and it gets really dark by 5 p.m. So sometimes if I start these sessions a little bit too late, I definitely lose light. So I do apologize if there's a little bit of like flashing going by every so often because it's me adjusting my lamp so that we can have proper lighting, hopefully. But also, for some reason, my webcam still does the weird thing where it kind of jumps up in contrast and a little bit of saturation whenever my hand is present. Even though I've like tried my best to turn off all the settings that potentially kind of cause that to happen, but it just won't turn off. So apologies about that. I guess that's also the downside if I want to leave the entire full footage of me working on something kind of like in a time-lapse format. But maybe it is easier for people to view if I do it more like of like snippets of real-time footage. And I do like real-time footage when it comes to certain mediums, just because it does give a better indication of how long I end up doing certain parts. Other than like full-length ASMR videos that I do occasionally, those ones like actually show like when I take pauses or if I'm like thinking in between or like actually just working through the entire thing pretty much nonstop, versus me working on something and then doing snippets, because I think it's a good way to show how fast I work in terms of like, oh, this maybe is how I hold the pen and like do a few scribbles to put down color, versus like kind of the perception of the time lapse where I don't think people think I work this quickly, because that would be insane, but it doesn't really give you a good range on how long I spent on the drawing, I guess, which is why I like to occasionally do like the keep me company videos or the ASMR ones that are like full session, because there's definitely confusion at the very beginning when I used to post ASMR videos, like the iPad ones, and I would do like a 3-hour session, but I would condense it into 30 minutes of footage, and people think that I end up drawing it all entirely in 30 minutes, which doesn't make sense because I feel like the jumps in my videos are pretty apparent, so I wasn't too sure why there was like so much confusion, but maybe it's because like people put in the background, so like they're not fully paying attention, and maybe the jumps just feel like they're not too far apart, I guess. Who knows? I don't know. But with the larger one finished, I'll do more of like an overview of it a little bit later because it's not technically quite done, but I ended up switching to the smaller one. And like I mentioned, this one will be kind of in real time with just like the cuts and stuff because like I said, I want to show a little bit of like actually how slowly I end up coloring things if I'm using something like alcohol markers or water-based markers. I definitely want to do another spread where it's a little bit heavier on the inking so that I can do a lot of like black areas and then going back in and doing like a lot of monochromatic grays to kind of build up the page. I think that could be fun. I think I saw something recently that made me want to do it because they have a very like cartoony style with very like bold eyes and bold line work. So I just think it could be fun to have a very monochromatic page for something, or maybe I can do like a mini comic or something and we can ink that together in my sketchbook, because I do have a really dumb idea, so maybe I will save that and maybe you'll see it sometime, or maybe I'll do it digitally, who knows. I think also on this paper the splotchiness is a little bit more apparent, so it doesn't go on super flat, if that makes sense. I think the other sketchbook where I had the thicker paper and if I have a really juicy marker, it lays down pretty flat, which I actually really like the clean look. This one makes me feel a little bit more like, not sketchy, but it just feels a little bit less final and very pristine, which I feel like it's a little bit better for me because then I can use it for maybe sketching or just not making sure that things are too precious when I'm working on them. But for now, I ended up doing like majority of the skin tone. I tried my best to bleed it in here and there. And for the most part, I didn't really want to do too much blending per se. So the downside with this paper being so thin, usually it's not like really a problem. It can still blend with the colors and all that, and the colors are still very vibrant on this paper. But if I don't leave ample time to let the markers actually dry a little bit, it starts to pool a little bit on the plastic below. So it might, I guess, like push the pigment a little bit. So I don't want to go over areas too much without letting it dry completely. And then this way I'm also not staining the kind of matte as much either. Even though you can just clean it with rubbing alcohol if you have it, or your colorless blender if you want to use that to kind of clean up your little protection mats for your papers. But if you do end up playing Reverse 1999, or you do play Reverse 1999, let me know who's your favorite character. I think like Sotheby, especially with the most recent one, I think it's the most recent story for her. Made me a little bit sad, but I just love her. She's just so positive and just so carefree and very fun, and she just loves to experiment with like different stuff, and I think she's just so cute. And I love Voyager, obviously. There's like a few other characters I really like as well. But as of like who I want to kind of summon for in the future, Tooth Fairy is kind of like the main reason I kind of started playing Reverse 1999. So basically a few months ago, like earlier this year, I saw like bunch of ads where it was like Tooth Fairy kind of like with her official art alongside with like the little chibi avatar version, and I just really loved the art style, but I knew I would not be able to commit to another like gacha-esque game, and I didn't know what like type of game it was. I seen a little bit of the gameplay, but I didn't know it was like kind of like turn-based. You also have like cards in a way, or like your skills are like kind of like set as cards, if that makes sense. So in a way for me, it's closer to like FGO, and I played a little bit of that because of my older brother. But I think because I wasn't sure on the gameplay, I didn't really want to get into it quite yet. But then after switching to like Honkai Star Rail, I kind of preferred the turn-based because it was just more low-key. Genshin's nice, but it requires a little bit more of your attention to play it, so it just became a little bit too much to handle. So I played Honkai Star Rail like quite a bit. But then after that, after I saw like Tooth Fairy, I was like, maybe I'll download it in the future. And then obviously Voyager and Sotheby kind of like sealed the deal for me. But the other characters that I kind of want, obviously I want Ezra and Marcus for sure, because I think both of them are super adorable. And I forget the girl's name. She's like the Cantonese speaking one that has the like a Ghostbuster vibe and like kind of like the Hong Kong horror, which I absolutely love that aesthetic. And then I think Joe or Jay is coming up next, so I'm going to be pulling for him as well. And then there's the half bird man guy. I think his name is Jetien, maybe. But yeah, if you have favorite characters, do let me know. I would love to hear about them. And there's definitely like so many characters I think I don't really know about. So definitely let me know. But in terms of like the progress we're making, I am finished mostly with the coloring. So we're going back into our line work and using the dark blue. Now, unfortunately, I was a little bit heavy-handed with the dark blue pen, probably from a different session, so it doesn't work the best at the moment to get like more finer lines, and I kind of have to do more of like a scribbly motion back and forth to make sure that I get it dark enough as well as just accurate to what I want it to be. But for this step, I like doing a mixture of different colors for the line art. One, it kind of helps with the contrast because layering up the dark blue on top of kind of like that burgundy-ish red just makes it a little bit darker, and it kind of makes the lines pop a little bit more. And in my opinion, because the lines become a little bit more bold and you're focused on it, it does make things look a little bit more clean compared to having my line art and some of my colors compete with one another. So I definitely think this one needed that extra step, like I end up usually doing for some of my other traditional art mediums that I've been doing more recently. But definitely for other spreads, I will revisit the kind of like limited color palettes that I do with water-based markers, as that's like my favorite way to fill up spreads. And I'll definitely do more like graphite pencil drawings, and I will tackle more gouache definitely in the sketchbook. That's kind of like my main goal, and I definitely chickened out because I would have liked to do another gouache session where I was going to paint Voyager for today instead of doing it with the alcohol markers, but yeah, ended up chickening out. And we kind of have the finished result of the little drawings here, and you can kind of see the massive amount of bleed through. It's almost like a 1-to-1 for the colors. So yeah, I actually really like how these ones turned out just for the colors alone. I definitely want to draw her a lot more so I can make her look a little bit less derpy every time. But hopefully you guys enjoyed today's session, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video, hopefully. Bye!